Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Interstellar. So, it's kind of odd going into this film based on the runtime of this movie. I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to watch this film, but man, would it be cool if I could. Figure out a way to watch this and get into it and enjoy it. And I was like, F it, let's figure out some way, right? So, I went into this movie and there was very little that I actually remembered about this film from my very first viewing, because I think the very first time I viewed it was right around the time it came out. So now that I'm rewatching this movie, I'm like, man, this movie was actually really good, but there's so much like science behind this world that I feel like I'm not going to be able to properly help people understand what this world is, because I might not know the science behind things. But I'll try to do my best. I'll try to just explain what goes on in this world, and I'll try to do my best to try to explain the science part of things and whatever the heck else that I need to try to explain. But I'm going to try to also not have to take 2.5 some odd hours to break this whole movie down either. That would seem like madness for me to I'm going to go through the whole entire film in almost 3 hours, and I'll just have to come up with the best, most impactful parts, or the parts that I like the most. So, and that'll probably be dodging and dipping in a lot of just the sciencey parts. So watch this movie on your own. If you've never seen it, it's a really enjoyable film. I'm sure a lot of people have probably seen this movie hundreds of times, or they've probably seen it once and they're like, I didn't like it. I think the time of which that I saw this movie, it's probably another one of those where, when I watched it, I'm like, I don't understand this film. I didn't really grasp the first original watching. I was like, there is just so much about this that's like, brr. But it seems that also I've been watching a lot of outer space films, and so really just starting to grasp a little bit more about outer space and stuff like that. I just watched the movie Stowaway, which is actually a really good piece, or just started to watch I watched the movie Warning that came out recently. 2021 recently. It'll be an old movie by whenever someone is to see this. So teeing it up, what is Interstellar about? Really, I think a lot of people would be a positive about this movie. I think I'm a positive thing about this movie. I probably have slightly mixed feelings. I think my biggest problem is a lot of outer space, though, right? A lot of astronaut stuff, right? That's the whole point of the film. That seems like a stupid thing to complain about. A lot of outer space, right? A lot of astronauts, a lot of them going out in some planet somewhere. Could we just keep this movie all on Earth? No. That's the whole purpose of the film, is having these people going out and trying to discover other planets that are to just be like Earth. And funny enough, we have Matt Damon, who had gone on to play another astronaut character in The Martian. And you know what, if you could possibly figure out some way, you could probably connect these two movies. But that seems like you're really just asking for some kind of goofy kind of editing kind of scheme going on here. So, and plus also, why would you watch numerous hours of astronaut movie to connect all these things? So, going into this film, I find this movie to be a fun film. We have characters that we can really invest in. We really, luckily don't have Matthew McConaughey seemingly trying to be Matthew McConaughey in this film, and I can appreciate that. The weird thing that I think only matters to people for this entire film is the one scene where Matthew McConaughey is bawling his eyes out, like, while he's watching some video of his family's life, like, growing up right before his eyes in a number of these videos that are to be spanning over a number of years, to the point of recently Cooper is to get more and more sad about all of this, because why wouldn't he? But he's the only one they really focus on for the most of this film. Like, everybody else is just to kind of like, they don't get their own little moment. Only Matthew McConaughey does. Because they're like, hey man, I'm not going to cry. You don't pay me enough to cry. I'm not going to be like having a crying scene intermittent with, or like sliced together with Matthew McConaughey's scene. No. So about like everybody else like watching their videos together. So yeah, so let's try to explain this world. Let's tee it up a little bit better. And so let's go on and explain what this world is about. So it seems that we have a kid who is to be seeing a ghost. And we, of course, have Matthew McConaughey's character Cooper, who's like, all right. There's probably a ghost in here, all right. I bet there is. He doesn't say all right in this movie, but like that's the always go-to thing that you always think of, like Matthew McConaughey, or that weird bull car commercial where he's like, it's gonna glide. Look at that bull. Whatever. So I don't know what it is with Matthew McConaughey. He really picks these kind of interesting projects at some point of his life. So that thing came like that. Also, that whole like bull car commercial was like hugely popular. Also, like that really took off for some absurd reason. So we have a world where it is to seemingly become harder and harder for people to breathe. Because they are seemingly in a world that is to be surrounded with so much dust and so much dirt, and is to collect seemingly into this dust of a storm-like thing, to where anybody at any moment would have to evacuate this part of this like section, to go on and now decide to have to forcibly live somewhere else, to avoid all this dust, to avoid all this dirt, to avoid suffocating on a planet. Because that's all they're really left to do, is to just suffocate. So we have Cooper that I guess at some point had been this pilot that had gone on to take this plane, and then he had went off and done other things, becoming a farmer. And so we find Cooper was kind of forced into farming simply because there is a world telling him that we no longer need engineers. All we need is more farmers to farm more crop. So we start to live in a world where we are to lose resources. We are to lose things like MRIs, and we are starting to lose things like simply only having one real crop left, which is just corn, and that's about it. So we have things that are starting to really just dwindle down, and so now we just have it to where NASA has come upon their own to come up with this contingency plan. Come up with this plan to just say, okay, we now just have to send people out in space through this wormhole because we have technically already done that. 10 years ago, we had sent somebody through this wormhole to see what results they could do to come up with this proper next Earth solution. And so the funny part is I really don't feel like we have these people go onto these planets and they arrive to this immediate solution that's like, yeah, like we figured it out. And so like that's what like comes out of this story is just like we're just really enjoy the journey here and see how eventually Matthew McConaughey is to make it out of this. So, with that said, I think now it's about that coveted time to just go into spoilers about this movie. I'm going to sneeze here in a second. My apologies, I sneezed. So, if you want a professional scientist who can break down every ditch second to second, frame upon frame of this movie, go ahead and find that somewhere because I'm sure there is. And that person would be breaking it down so thoroughly that they would probably have to like break down like certain parts of this film, and it would be like Interstellar part 954 because this person like still hasn't really covered yet the very end of this film because he took like 2 years to explain one scene. Like I still have to explain like how Matthew McConaughey is to get to where he is at the end of the film and be exactly what they have created at the end of this, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, so go ahead and go into one of those experts that are to break this film down better than I will, because I'm going to break it down in the only way of which that I will like to. So, let's go into this double 5 time territory, because it's about that time again to go into spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So, very beginning of the film, we are having, of course, Matthew McConaughey test this this rocket, and so it seems that the computer is to tell that Matthew is not going to make some part of this, so they kind of give up on it. And so we have Cooper, who is to go on and is to become a farmer instead of doing what he had done prior, just kind of retire from being involved in NASA. And so we go on to have Cooper, who, of course, is to have a daughter that is to mention that her books are to be consistently dropping from her bookcase, and that there's something about it that just seems really unnatural about it. And so Cooper is just like, okay, sure, like maybe she's just imagining this. Maybe it's like maybe it's some kind of tremors, maybe it's some kind of earthquake or something, or maybe it's some kind of something that could justify these books falling off. Maybe the bookshelves aren't like angled correctly, or so. I don't know. It could be any number of things. So Cooper is to of course have his father Donald there, that is to go on and have Cooper go to parent-teacher conferences because Donald doesn't want to go to another parent-teacher conference. So Cooper's like, okay, I'll go. So we go on to have Cooper go to this like parent teacher conference thing, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot of. It just feels like Cooper is just going to the school's principal and to, I guess, some Miss Hanley teacher talking about these talking about his kids. I'm like, so like these kids must be in some kind of trouble, or there must be like something like really wrong to have now Cooper going in and needing to talk to these people. So the principal is to mention to Cooper that that Tom will be nothing more than a farmer because Tom can't be an engineer right now because there's too many engineers. And so Cooper is just like, well, like, so you're basically telling my son that he has to, like, there is a glass ceiling for him. And like even though he's like ridiculously smart and like he can be anything that he wants, you're just telling him, well, you can be anything that you want as long as it's just a farmer. And so this principle kind of breaks it down to just be like, well, like the world needs a lot more farmers. The world has too many engineers. And so Cooper is just like, sure, fine. And so now Cooper, of course, is to ask about Murph. And because, oh, I completely forgot about the whole drone thing. We'll get back to that. We'll kind of get back to it. We'll go into it. So Cooper is to ask about Murph, and because of course Murphy's Law and so on and so forth. And whatever can happen will happen. So the teacher is to explain that Murphy was to go against the opinions of this one textbook because they had rewritten their textbooks because I guess they're trying to mass manipulate people into believing something that may or may not be true, but they don't care. They just want somebody to learn something their way. And so textbooks had been adjusted to say that the lunar landing had been faked and was just to really be there to create certain kinds of equipment or useless equipment and so on and so forth. And Matthew McConaughey is like, well, you know what, out of that whole lunar landing situation, like we ended up getting an MRI, which unfortunately we no longer have now. And technically that would have saved my wife from certain death from getting a cyst on her head. And like they couldn't have found it in time, and so she died because of it. So if the MRI would have still been here, my wife would still be alive, and you would have her going and having these conversations with you and not me. And so they're like, well, because she because she had a negative thing to say about what we are to put in our textbooks, and she ended up getting in a fight about it with some students and so on and so forth. We want you to go home and figure out a way to punish her. And so Cooper's like, oh, all right, well, yeah, I'm going to definitely figure out a way to perfectly punish her. I'm going to go and take her to some baseball game. Yeah, her favorite team is playing. And we're going to get a bunch of candy and a bunch of popcorn, like just all kinds of sugar that she'll ever want. And I'll just go and take her to that. And that'll be her punishment. that she'll just enjoy her time at this baseball game because you stupid people in your books and and there is no like other answer. There is to just be your answer, and so on and so forth. So how we get to this point here, how we actually get to Cooper making it to this school, is that Cooper, Tom, and Murph all are to drive this. All of them, they're all inside this truck while Cooper is driving them to this school. And so, while driving, all of a sudden Cooper is to pop his tire, but that doesn't stop him, weirdly, from finding this Indian drone that I guess had been kind of flying around for 10 years because it was to have these significant solar absorbing like panels of sorts to keep it running for a very long stretch of time. And so Cooper is to kind of adjust into this car and have Tom drive the car. And so Cooper is trying to find a way of getting control of this drone and being able to drop it back down so that way he could take certain parts and bits and pieces out of it and then be able to kind of take it as like scrap metal or whatever, because this drone is no longer in use. So after that, they end up heading to this school. And so the principal's like, well, why are you so late? And he's like, hey, I got a flat tire. Sorry. So, like, well, you found a drone. And he's like, yeah, I found a drone. So what? So they go on and they head to this baseball game. And so them heading to this baseball game all of a sudden started this kind of dust like storm to head into this baseball game. And so I think like New York was playing and possibly some other possible team was playing. Like, this kind of looks like the Field of Dreams setup for some weird reason. And I'm wondering if these people were to have actually like been in Iowa during this film, because that would make a lot of sense to just be like, maybe it was the Field of Dreams set that they were kind of putting things together. So they stop the game, and we now go on to having everybody run back to their house and evacuate where they're from. There's sirens going on, and so Murph is to forget to close her window, and there's a bunch of dust that gets put into this room. And so all of a sudden we have Cooper, who is to weirdly start to notice that there is to be some kind of Morse code put into this dust. I guess possibly by this ghost of, for some reason. And so that forces Cooper to realize maybe there is some truth behind what Murph is to say. So Cooper is taking Murph to this place that is to have this location. And so while Coop is to break through this fence, he is to all of a sudden run into this marine robot, this weird kind of lined robot that's like, if you basically looked at it, like it has this hand approach to it where there's a screen in the middle of it, and this is to be some kind of goofy-esque robot. So we have this marine robot who is interrogating Matthew after he had tasered him and I guess had taken Murph out of this car. So Coop is asking where his daughter is, and this Marine is just like, well, hey, I need to know some information first. How did you find this location? Blah 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 blah. And so Cooper is just like, God, you know that you're like such a nothing thing to me. Like you're basically the equivalent of some lawnmower or just some like I have a ton of you things that are going on and like farming my land for me right now and and like you're nothing to me. Like we had at one point where Cooper was to realize that there is something being way absurdly off about the compasses in his farming equipment, and so he had to forcibly go and adjust it because of his farming equipment being that their compasses were way off. So Cooper is to go on and have has to be showcased basically the man behind the curtain, Professor Brand. And so Cooper is to immediately know who Professor Brand is. He's like, oh my God, Professor Brand. Like, I know you. Like, hey, like, good old times, right? And so we still have, of course, they're still asking him questions about how did you get here, how did you figure this out, and Professor Brand's like, you know what, like let's give that a rest because he's not going to answer us. Any answer he's probably going to give us isn't going to make sense. So like let's just drop that right now because we need him for something. So Professor Brand is to explain to Cooper that they had sent people 10 years ago on a mission once before and they haven't heard word from them, and the whole part of this mission was to go on and find a alternate Earth that can be inhabitable and so on and so forth. So Professor Brand is wanting to offer Cooper the ability to fly this mission because anyone else who's going to be chosen to fly this mission hasn't had the experience that Cooper has had and is not going to do as well as him because they haven't even been in the flight simulator, let alone had like kind of under their belts as much things as like Cooper really has had. So that is to just say like, okay, well, because Professor Brand is to explain everything to Cooper that basically their only farming resource left is really corn, and like that's all they have really left here to just kind of really be left for food, and so they're starting really to run out of the ability to figure out things. And so Professor Brand is to say that the whole entire like compound that they're in is actually to eventually be some big massive ship of a thing that is to rocket off to try to go through the wormhole after these people are to pick the best Earth. The only problem is that Professor Brand is having problems with the gravity issue. And so maybe by the time that they go off to do this mission, Professor Brand should be able to come up with how to solve this whole problem. And so Cooper like is to just be like, well, like this sounds all like reasonable. It's like a battle to save the world. Like how am I going to say no to that? So Cooper, of course, goes home and is to basically tell his family, like, yeah, like, I'm gonna have to leave. Like, I'm gonna have to do this mission to save our planet. And so, but weirdly, there's also like a contingency plan that these people have that if there is basically no way to save planet Earth, that everybody's just going to end up suffocating on planet Earth and there's nothing they can do, then I guess that they had figured out some way to, via samples and so on and so forth, that they can basically just test tube baby humans out to then create life on another planet if that's their only real legitimate option here, is to just come up with this secondary plan. So, and it feels like there's some people that don't even know that plan. Some people in the higher ups don't even realize that plan is to be a legitimate thing. So, besides the people probably going on the mission and like the highest person that is to send them on this mission is probably only know that plan. So Cooper is to go home, is to basically try and talk to his family before he goes off. And so Murph is like, no, I'm not going to talk to you. No, I'm not going to do it. No, you can't get me to talk to you. And so Cooper is to tell his daughter, it's like, well, hey, like, I'm going to give you this watch, and then we're going to compare. We're going to compare watches, and like maybe by the time that I come back to you, like you and I will probably be the same age, or older, or younger, or maybe you'll be dead. Sadly, so because who knows, could happen. So Tom is to ask like Cooper if he's gonna be able to get uh, Cooper's car, and he's like, "Hey, I'll have them bring this back to you, so it'll be your truck," and because he's gonna be gone for a several amount of years, and so we also have like we had this moment where like both Donald and Cooper had where they talked about like uh or where they're giving each other crap, where they're talking about like old man and like an old man and kind of like the whole curmudgeon kind of like you take care of him, you old man. It's like, yeah, I will, you old man. Like that kind of goofy like love and whatever. But like we don't really have like a real like touching moment here uh like between these two characters of like a father and a son. And like because like thinking about it, like Donald, this is going to be the last time Donald is ever going to see his son, because he won't live long enough to see like his son come back. He won't. And so really there should have been much seemingly much a stronger, much more thing here to really have some legitimate meaning, but there wasn't. So that just kind of sucked. So Cooper is to, of course, go on to his mission. And so we have Professor Brand that personally delivers Cooper's car and personally delivers this message to this family. And Professor Brand, because Cooper had given his family like a goodbye message before he was to go off to this wormhole, to where they weren't going to have much of connection between, or it was to have a difficult connection between uh, the space station or the command center and the astronauts. Command center, mission control, mission control. There we go. So, so we have Professor Brand talking to Donald, and so we have, of course, Professor Brand talking to Donald and saying like, "Well, hey, like it seems that Murph is to have some real potential of being this really smart kid, and maybe I should fuel that flame and like help her become like a really smart kid." And so of course we have it where Donald is mentioning, well, yeah, like she's already stumped her teachers, and so maybe when she gets involved with you, she's gonna stump you too. So just saying like, yeah, like test my daughter. She's gonna, or testable technically, test my granddaughter because she's gonna go and like just like blow you guys away. So now we go off to have Cooper going on to his mission, and so while we have these people go off to this mission, we of course have when they kind of when they go onto this mission, they're of course supposed to hook up to a like a space station called Endurance, and so weirdly, while they are to like get to Endurance, the ship is to consistently spin until they actually get to Endurance. Weirdly, and we of course I think Doyle, who is to start to get a little squeamish and starts to get a little buh. So uh, we of course have uh, Brand, who is to go on and try to give uh, this guy medication for this. We also had uh, Professor Brand, who is going and giving them this like go gentle into that night and so on and so forth, that whole like old poem about them going off, and so we have of course like Brand, who had to say her goodbyes to her father, and we are also just kind of hoping like that like Professor Brand is going to last a really long time here to either figure out this answer or to have like something go well with this mission. So we at first have to uh I'm trying to what is the perfect thing here? That's not it. Uh God, where is the let me pause here for a second. Okay. So we have of course them uh showcasing us the first robot, who is to be called Tars, who is to supposedly have a very massive like sense of humor. And so we have this robot who his sense of humor is to be supposedly at I think it was like 100% or something like that, to where we have this robot that I think jokes around far too much, to where uh to where Cooper is to just say, it's like, how about you just drop it down to 70%, that sense of humor. So And so we also had at one point that supposedly Brand was to be seeing something while they were to go through this wormhole, because that's the next thing that they are to do here. So they go through the wormhole, and so we have Cooper, who is to ask, of course, like, well, like, Doyle, is there any real like strategy to go through this wormhole? And Doyle is like, no. Like, it's just go in there and figure it out, like, and hope that you survive afterwards, because like there is no like skill to, like, it's not like anybody has had gone through a wormhole numerous times. We also had Cooper, who was to like be kind of weirded out by what the wormhole was to look like, and he's just like, it's just a circle. And they're like, well, what do you think that it was supposed to be? So they go through this wormhole, and so Doyle is to tell Cooper, it's like, well, hey, like, our instruments can't really do much in this wormhole, so just kind of let the wormhole kind of do most of the work. So they go through the wormhole and they arrive through the other end, and so I guess they still can do certain kind of videos and talk to certain kind of people and so on and so forth. So now they're having to, of course, pick which planet is to be the best planet to go on to check in on. And so every one of the planets are, I guess, named after every one of the astronauts. So I think they at first end up going to the Miller planet, and then they decide, after all the problems that they have had, that they're probably only going to be able to go onto one more planet. And so they decide which planet that actually is going to be. So we push on and are to at first go to this Miller planet. And so supposedly there is to be a time slip between when we get to the Miller planet and Earth's time. So every single hour that I guess these people are to be on this planet for, we find out that supposedly they think that every hour they're on this planet, it's going to be 7 years of Earth's time. And so they have to figure out a quick way to get on this planet and get off of it. So they are to go on to this planet to realize that there is no one there. And so Brand is to make the assumption that Miller, because of the time slip, possibly could have already died on this planet, or may had died right before they were to have gotten there, or had maybe, like, I don't know, like, she's dead, and that's all that really matters. So they go on, and now they're trudging through this kind of like knee-high like water, and to try and like hugely, like, because every second on this planet counts. So Brand is trying to get this data, and all of a sudden Brand is to see that there must be some kind of mountains here, and Cooper's like, no, that's not a mountain, that's a massive wave. So Brand is trying to get the data, and so uh and so I think Tars was to stay with stay with uh I want to say it's I'm gonna ill pronounce this here. Ramilla, Ram Romilly, Romilly, and so they ended up taking this other robot called Case, and so Case goes on and is to retrieve Brand and scoop her up and try to quickly get her back to the ship. And so Doyle, who is also trying to make his way back to the ship, is to have Brand get into this airlock. Cooper is trying to quickly close this door and accidentally closes the door, not realizing that Doyle is not back into the door yet. Doyle, all of a sudden, because of this wave coming in, gets crushed by this wave and he ends up dying. And so now, really, Brand has to live with the fact that Doyle is pretty much dead because of her, or like something like that. So we now go back with this data to go back to Romilly to find out that instead of 7 years that have passed, a little bit more than that has passed. And that Romilly had stayed behind on their ship to see if he could figure out how to solve Professor Brand's problem with him. And so we had the ship that had a problem starting because the ship, I guess, was to get flooded. And, excuse me. So instead, they had to figure out some way of trying to conveniently get the ship to work so that way the thrusters could go, because they're thinking that they're going to be stuck on this planet and there's no way for, like, the world's going to end or Earth's going to, like, get suffocated and there's no way for them to get off of this planet. So they luckily are to be able to get back to Romilly, and we find out that supposedly 23 some odd years have passed. And they're like, oh my god, you could have probably slept through a lot of this. And, like, you could have cryo-sleeped. Like, interesting enough, like, the mission that had gone on supposedly before this mission had supposedly been called, I think it was called the Lazarus mission, which was the mission before. And so that kind of had an interesting name to it. So we have our characters going back to the ship, and so now there's like a cluster of videos for supposedly Brand and Cooper to watch. So Cooper starts watching the several videos showcasing like Tom as a much like growing of age guy. And so I guess Tom is to only do these videos because Murph was still just like curmudgeon, like, I'm not gonna go and do these videos. We had Donald coming in at one point, like saying like, I'm sorry, son, but like Murph is just this stubborn girl and she just doesn't want to talk to you. I'm sorry. So Tom evidently is to find a girl named Lois, and I guess they are to settle down, have a family together, have a kid together, and so slowly but surely Tom is to start to realize how possibly pointless these videos are, and that Tom may never hear like from his father again. And so there's to be one last video that ends up coming to Cooper mentioning, or from his daughter mentioning how that Cooper had lied. That Murph is now the exact same age that Cooper was when he left, and he is still not home. Just Like, we really have this kind of family that's just kind of like having these kind of bitter like videos to send to him. And you would have honestly thought that they wouldn't have just sent all these videos because, like, when going through like a military thing, like, I know that really they would probably tell you that someone would have to like screen through all these, and so just kind of be like very like in general about letters, or just kind of be very positive about your letters. And like, that's like, if you're going to send him a send anyone a letter, just kind of be very positive about it, and just kind of be like kind of very uh just kind of like, just so it's kind of weird that these videos were just to easily go out. So we now see a much older Murphy, and so Professor Brand is kind of surprised that Murphy was to be sending a message to anybody. And so Murph is just like, well, yeah, so like, it was a special message. And so Professor is like, oh, okay, well, I'm happy for you. So both Professor Brand and Murphy are still trying to figure out this equation. And so really just Murph is to mention, it's like, well, maybe it's all about time. Like, maybe we have like just, and Professor is like, yeah, I know I've wasted so much time trying to come up with the answer. And so Murph is just like, no, like, there has to be some kind of like thing of time or something for us to like figure this whole thing out. So now we have Cooper, Brand, and Romilly, who are to mention that because they've basically been like using fuel to kind of stay at this planet, kind of waiting for these people to come back. They've spent like 20 some odd years spending this time to try and get to anywhere. Now the plan is that all they can do is they only have time to get to one more planet. They only have enough fuel to get to one more planet. And so they're now having to forcibly decide which planet to go on to. And so there's this one planet called Wolf, and there's this one planet called Man, because like Man is to actually be Matt Damon's character. So like, where do you think we're going to? And so we have the majority vote where people are to vote which planet they're going to go to. And supposedly Man's planet is to have more promising results than Wolf's planet is. And so it seems like they're trying by majority to go to Man's planet. And so Brand is like, well, I want to go to Wolf's planet. Like, I think he has like something really there, legitimately there. And now Cooper brings in this whole like kind of like elephant in the room kind of thing, where it's like, well, Wolf is actually Brand's lover. That's the only reason why she actually wants to go back, or wants to go to that planet to see her lover. And so Brand is like, that's not all what it's about. Because I think Brand can actually trust Wolf's results. Whereas Man, you don't know. You can't really go on and trust his actual results. But so majority rules, so they decide to go on to Man's planet. And so they have to figure out how to decide to they have to do this kind of like maneuver to get around this one planet called uh, uh, Gargantua to kind of get their way to Miller's planet. They kind of have to like come up with a maneuver to get there, and so they end up doing so. And so all three of them are to go onto the surface of this planet, and they go on and they wake up Miller, and Miller is all of a sudden crying because it's been so long since he's seen anybody. And so man is to say, like Matt Damon, man, it's kind of weird calling him that. So man is to say that it's like you guys never want to ever feel the feeling again of desperately wanting to see someone else's face. And so man is to go through and kind of show these people the planet and tell them that there is to eventually be a actual surface to this planet, and it's all covered in ice. And so it seems that man had gone on to dismantle his robot, and so they're just kind of like, well, like maybe we can figure out how to fix this problem. Maybe we can figure out how to work this robot. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. Hugh-Man, evidently is Hugh-Man? Really? His name is Hugh-Man? Really? That's his name? Wow, that sucks. So that's a name that sucks. So man is to go and tell all these people the truth that Professor Brand had the answer of this whole gravity equation the whole entire time. He just could not trust to have that ship go off into this wormhole because there were so many factors that could have possibly caused so many people's deaths while trying to get through there, because they ended up sending like a probe through the wormhole once before. And so Professor Brand could not trust to bring this ship off through this wormhole. And so basically they were going to doom planet Earth and kill everyone off and just have this whole plan B thing to be what they were actually going to do. That Professor Brand was to be okay with dooming planet Earth to have some other plan B go out there for them to go on and create life on some other planet and F all of everyone on planet Earth. They're gonna die anyways. And so Professor Brand on his deathbed is to tell Murph the truth. That he's like, I lied to all of you. And I doomed you all, kind of thing. Because Professor Brand was to figure it out, but he could not trust whether or not everything was going to work out. So he just was scared. He was scared what was going to happen. So we have, of course, Murph going and sending a message to Brand telling her that her father is dead and that he had died without any pain. But then also Murph comes around and is to tell Brand, like, did you know? Like, did my father know? Like, did you plan this the whole time? That you guys were going to just let us all die off and suffocate on this earth? Like, was that your guys' plan all along to just kill us all off? And so Brand is getting this message being on this ship, and so Brand is to find out that her father is dead, and so Cooper is there to try to comfort her. But then, like, the messages that come off after that about the whole plan about taking this whole Plan B situation and making that the legitimate plan instead of having it be the Plan A. The Plan A was never the plan. And so now we go on to have Man going and taking Cooper and kind of showing him the planet and kind of having him be this tour guide of sorts. And so what ends up playing out is when Cooper isn't looking, Man goes and detaches Cooper's his kind of comm device where he can talk to the other astronauts. So Man then is to tell Cooper the truth, that Man was so desperate to get somebody to come to his planet to come and pick him up, because he knew that if he didn't have the best results, that no one would come to get him and he would just die on this planet. To where Man was going on and, like, he had put in his sleeping tank, he never put a date for him to wake up. He just put a sleeping thing in there forever, because he naturally assumed that like no one was going to come back to this planet because it was useless. So Romilly is to go and like do some work in Man's compound, and all of a sudden the compound ends up exploding. And so it's like, okay. So now it seems like we have some distrust here. And so I think TARS ends up going off to disconnect something with Man's ship if Man is going to eventually go and take off. So now Cooper is to have been headbutted by Man, and Cooper is telling Man, it's like, well, hey, like, you do realize that, because they go and headbutt one another with these helmets, and so Cooper's like, oh my god, you do realize you headbutting me, there's a 50-50 chance that you're probably going to suffocate too. And Man is just like, well, like, those are way better odds than I've ever gotten. And so Cooper is now suffocating, and so Cooper is to luckily find his comm device, get that turned on, and it is to desperately tell Man that his mask is cracked. And so Brand runs out there to try and give him some device for him to breathe. And so we have it where now Man is going off to his ship because it's a whole chase for them to try to get back to Endurance, or Endeavor. I think it's Endurance. Yeah. To be the first ones to basically just get the heck out of there. And so now, like, the guys are getting into their ship and they're leaving, because this planet is useless anyways. Like, this planet isn't going to really help them out. So they go off, and it's now a race to endurance, and so Matt Damon ends up getting there first, but he cannot latch on to endurance. It's impossible for him to do so. But man just stubbornly wants to go on and hook into this anyways, and they're telling him not to. They're telling him it's a mistake, and like they're trying to tell him like what's going to happen when he's going to do this thing, but he does it anyways. And so they're desperately trying to figure out some way to talk to him, to tell him what's exactly going on. And so man just does it anyways, and he is to not only like kill himself instantly, and then all of a sudden he is to start to have endurance start spinning and spinning around to where it's almost going to go into the surface of this planet. And so now Cooper has to figure out how to match the speed of this endurance to couple with it and to stop this ship from spinning. And so Cooper now has to like match the spin of the ship and is to have to like latch onto it. And so and like this is like a 1 in a million kind of shot, and we have Cooper who is to tell like Tars like, hey man, like I might pass out, so like one of you guys is gonna have to take the wheel, so to speak, if I pass out, but like try and get this to latch on here. So they get it to latch on, and so I think Brand ends up passing out, but I guess luckily Cooper didn't. So we have them latching on. Cooper stops this ship from spinning, and because they need endurance to like get through the rest of this film, basically. So what their plan is now is, since they have very little fuel left, their big plan is to have some massive slingshotting like thing to slingshot through Gargantua to try and make it through the wormhole, try to make it to Earth. And so what happens along that way is that Cooper is to have at first Tars go on and sacrifice himself for these guys to make it further, and then Cooper is decided to sacrifice himself for Brand to make it back to Earth. And so Brand is like, Cooper, don't sacrifice yourself. And he's like, I have to. Like we have to give them back this data. Like, we have to, like, have them come back with these answers and so on and so forth. So Cooper is to go on to just kind of floating off in space. And so his ship is in such horrible condition that he has to eject out of his ship. And so he just continues to go on and float. He continues to float and is to seemingly make it onto this grid-like structure, and is to go on and find this place called the Tesseract, which isn't the Avengers kind of Tesseract. And so Matthew McConaughey is now in this Tesseract-like thing where he is to realize that these people from some other dimension were to come up with a way to help uh, Cooper's character solve this issue to help Earth. And but he can't, like, Cooper can't talk with them, but it seems that Tars is kind of getting this information about these people who are going and trying to help them solve this whole problem from some other, like, I think fifth dimension or something. So Cooper is then going through and trying to go through this tesseract like thing to find out there is all of a sudden these bookshelves that are to be like his bookshelves from when he is to have been at home with Murph. And so Cooper is to realize that since he is to possibly die on this mission, that now Cooper is to realize how pointless this mission really was. And that he is trying to come up with a way for Murph to convince Cooper to never go on this mission. And so now everything that was to be Murph's ghost is to actually be Cooper himself. The whole Morse code of things, having the book collection that was to all say stay, that Murph is to tell Cooper before he leaves. Um, the whole him going and finding this like dirt or dust like floor, and now Cooper is putting in the Morse code that Cooper is to find and say, hey, this is Morse code, all telling me this message or this address, and now I'm going to go there. That was all Cooper. And so Cooper is to realize he is to have to give them breadcrumbs to get to this point. And so now Cooper is to realize, well, like, I'm going to have to go, like, further and further into time, because Tars is to realize that, like, Cooper, like, Murph will never really understand what you're doing. Like, it'll take her years upon years upon years to understand what you have done here. And so Murph is just like, well, I just have to go to the perfect time for Murph to be smart enough for me to have her understand all this. So Murph is going through that perfect, or Cooper is going through that perfect Murph time period for her to understand all this. So now let's kind of go back to the Murph part of things. So Murph is now going with some doctor named Getty, who is to be Topher Grace's character, and she goes off to Tom's home to have Getty telling Murph that, like, these people are to have, like, horrible lungs and they need to get the heck out of here. It's very unsafe for them to live here. And so Murph is to tell them all to leave, but Murph just wants to stay because she's thinking that there's some kind of secret here that she wants to finally understand. And bizarrely, Murph is to still have this bookcase with all these books still on it. So Murph is like, there's got to be some answer here. And so now Cooper is to arrive at that perfect time and is to now be feeding Morse code into this watch that Murph is to leave. And so now we get some weird, goofy stuff happen here, where now Cooper is to go on in Morse code Murph, like, all of these messages. So she is to be able to figure this all out and solve this problem. And Eureka chuck a bunch of papers into the air and be like, I solved it, I did it, I figured this all out. So, like, I guess it's some weird, goofy tradition. And so now Cooper is to say, like, oh, okay, I guess I did all this. Like I guess I'm done now, and so on and so forth. And so all of a sudden we have Cooper, who is to weirdly wake up in some medical hospital somewhere on the planet Jupiter, who is it's to look like Earth, but it's to be weirdly Jupiter now. And we kind of see like there's some weird kind of setup where outside uh, Cooper's like hospital bed, he is to see like a baseball game going on where there's weirdly to be this house that's in the sky that's to be some other like homing environment that is to of course get their window broken in by this baseball. And I'm like, okay, this is so weird. So like I guess there's very little gravity here on this weird goofy thing that they're on. So now Cooper is to of course go on and find that they have prepared a whole brand new home for him and had prepared this farmland for him. And Cooper's like, like, why am I gonna have a farmland? And because she made Murph made a joke that like Cooper really loves farming, and so he's like you made me a farmer again. So Cooper is to go on and is to uh, see a bunch of these robots that are to all have these stories that are to be, I guess, of little stories of Cooper's past to kind of keep him company when there's probably going to be no one else really here. And also, they were to have been able to find Cooper's robot, and so he's like, okay, great. And so now, like, Cooper technically has a buddy to kind of be with. And so we have Cooper reprogramming the robot, and he's like, hey, like, what's your sense of humor settings? And he's like, well, like, set it at 70. And then, like, the robot makes a joke, and he's like, do you want it to be 55? Don't press it. So we have Cooper going on and re-meeting up with his daughter, who is to basically be on her deathbed, but she had like cryogenically slept to be prepared to meet Cooper when he's good and ready, and for her to like cryo sleep so that way she'll die when Cooper is to like be ready to see her. So all of this family that Cooper has probably never met or probably doesn't even know are to all be here. And so Cooper is to, of course, say goodbye to his daughter Murph, as she's, of course, to die. And Murph is to tell Cooper, it's like, well, hey, like, Brand is back. Brand is here on this planet, so maybe you should go and chase off after her, and like you two can go and live like the rest of whatever your guys' lives are going to be left like on the planet. You might as well. So so yeah, I thought that that was kind of really interesting. I thought that was kind of really uh, like Cooper going and flying off to find Brand, and like that was kind of a way to like end the movie of like, oh, did he find her? Did they kiss? Did they something or other? Because, anyways, like, did he go off there all the way to just tell her some joke and then the movie ends? Is that how the whole thing should end? So with that said, I think I'm also going to end. I'm going to get out of here. Um, Thank you guys for always watching this whole thing. If you did so, or you jumped off at some point, because then you wouldn't hear what I just said here. But yeah, a long stretch of a movie that I try to compile and try to not go into so many science stuff because I dared say did not want to. Um, we also, of course, had the moment where Cooper was to actually be the thing that Brand had a handshake with, because Brand was to say, "Oh, I had some handshake with something," and so we find out later that Cooper was to be that thing that Brand had that handshake with, because Cooper, after he had solved that problem, the Tesseract was to basically condense upon itself and was going to be no more because this problem was basically solved. So so they end up luckily finding Cooper before his oxygen completely like depleted. So with that said, I am going to get out of here. I think I've covered like this movie enough to my liking, but I just kind of went through all the events. I didn't have much commentary or whatever kind of jokes or laughing moments to just go through here because it's a 2.5 whatever movie. So it's just kind of like try to get this done as quickly as possible, because I know if I joke around through the whole entire thing, it's gonna take forever, because I'll just be like, yeah, that little thing, and it'll just take forever, and it'll like me joking around about all of it is just gonna take up a lot more time for an already long stretch of a movie that I haven't done a long stretch of a movie in probably X amount of days, just because I've gone through and tried to do much more simpler things. So I am going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.